In today's video, I'm going to go over 6 ways to make FU money with Shopify. As you guys can see, we're in one of my stores and we've done around $361,000 in just the last 7 days alone over here. Let's refresh the screen just so you guys know that these numbers are real. Boom, shows up the same. And this is just on one of our stores. Let's jump into another one of the stores and look at the last 7 days numbers. $250,000 as well. Refresh the screen again, just to show you guys again, telling the truth. And boom. So altogether, that's around $610,000 just on the Shopify side. We also do about 20% of our revenue on Amazon. So roughly another $120,000 we've done there, all in the last 7 days, which puts us to a run rate of over $3 million a month for the non-mathematicians at home. Now, the reason I share these numbers with you is just so you guys know that I know a little bit about what I'm talking about, and hopefully you guys can take this advice. My name is Ecom Moose. I run a portfolio of brands, as you guys can see over here. Our goal this year is to do over $50 million in sales. At the end of this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my first ever offer to be able to work with me one-on-one. I'm only going to be accepting 10 different founders and brand owners, and you have to be doing at least $100,000 a month. But pretty much everything that you learn in this video and all my other videos, I'm going to be working with you one-on-one to implement in your business for a guaranteed return on your investment of working with me. But you have to qualify and you have to fill out the form down below. So if you're interested, check that out. You guys, let's jump right into it. Today's video, we're going to go over the 6 ways to make FU money with Shopify. Now, before I jump into the 6 ways of what to do, I want to talk a little bit about what not to do, and probably what you're more familiar with hearing in the space, especially if you've listened to other dropshipping gurus or people talking about branded dropshipping or really just e-commerce in general. The thing is, it's not that those people are wrong. I think it's just very singular focus, because the model that is typically being preached is start advertising on either Facebook or TikTok. Usually it's going to be Facebook ads. People are going to talk about obviously creatives and UGC content and making sure you have a lot of creatives. People don't usually talk so much about the quality of those creatives, which we'll get into in just a bit, but they talk about making those creatives and scaling like that, and then trying to make your profit through the ads that you run on Facebook. And that's pretty much how the model is presented, which I think is, again, very singular and very scoped in on just one little aspect of what the actual business model should look like. In this video, I really want to go over my philosophy and how I look at the overall business model to actually be able to make FU money. And when I'm talking about FU money, I'm not talking about, just those Shopify, dashboards I was showing you of the revenue, because the revenue doesn't actually mean that much. It's more so, first off, about the profits that you can make, but not only the profits that you can make, but the actual valuation that you can tack onto your business, because the FU money doesn't even come from the profits. Even if you do a few $1 million a year, that's great in terms of profit. But reality is, you're not going to be pulling out a lot of that money. You'll probably pull out between 30 to 50% of that money, because you have to always front inventory if you go the traditional branded drop shipping route, not drop shipping, or just, branded storefront route or Shopify store route. You're going to have to front a lot of that money, and your cash flow is going to be constrained a lot of the times. The money isn't actually coming from even the profits. The money comes from the valuation and value of your business as a whole, which my model maximizes how much you can actually get paid on that. Because the traditional models that you're hearing from dropshipping, a dropshipping store might get a 1 to 2x multiple on EBITDA. So what does that mean? Even if your business does $1 million in profit over the course of a year, you could probably sell that store for $1 million to max $2 million if you're doing full dropshipping. Now, if you're doing, more of a branded approach and you have a good storefront and you have things kind of dialed in, but still that's kind of the extent of your model, maybe you can go 2 to 3x on that. So maybe you can sell that store for 2 million, maybe 3 million. But if you go through the model that I'm going to go over in this video, your multiples can start to look at 4x, maybe 5x, all the way up to 8x, depending on how well you execute on what I'm going to go into. With that being said, let's jump right into it. So we're going to go into point number 1, which is the offer foundation, which is kind of the backbone of everything I was just speaking about. This video is assuming that you already have a product or you know what you're going to be selling. If you're not already selling a product, or if you're not already in business, this is meant for if you're already scaling and above $100,000 a month, then this is going to be great for you. So you understand the model and how to actually maximize value in your business. Or even if you're you're a beginner, how to actually look at this business model different than how everyone else is preaching to look at it, so that you can go at it in the right way. And I'm going to try to simplify everything as much as possible. In terms of the offer foundation, this is really how you maximize the value of whatever product that you go into. And I'm not talking about this from the super straightforward and simplistic way of buy one, get one, or 50% off. While those are important parts of the offer, don't get me wrong, that's not what I mean by the offer foundation. What I mean by the offer foundation is this is what's going to dictate how much you can actually price your product for, even if it's a product that you're in a super competitive space that everyone else is selling the same exact product. If you do this part correctly, you can justify selling prices at probably 20% higher, 30% higher, sometimes even 50% higher than what the market is accustomed to, because of how well you position your product compared to everyone else. There's a few different parts of this, which, the pricing model we just went into. Arguably the most important part of this whole thing is this component right here, the subscription opt-in take rate. This is if you sell a product that is consumable, or it makes sense to purchase more than once, then this is going to be very relevant for you and how I would think about structuring your model around this concept as a whole. Your product, if it can be subscribed to, and it does make sense to buy on a monthly or a frequent basis, you should really be thinking about, as the priority of your entire business model, how do you get people to subscribe on the first purchase? There's a lot of examples of how people do it. A lot of people will give you extended discounts. A lot of people will give you free gifts only when you subscribe, and not free gifts if you don't subscribe. People will, do all types of things around that of how they position and frame the offer. But for what you need to understand in this is that this is one of the most important metrics in your business that not too many people talk about if you have some form of consumable product, which is what I really want to highlight for the sake of this video. You want to get this number to be as close to 100% of people that buy on your offer page subscribe. Now, obviously it's difficult to get to 100%, because to get to that 100%, you need to have a compelling enough offer where it would make sense for people to say, okay, I'm going to buy this product and be okay with subscribing on this first purchase without completely tanking your conversion rate, because obviously there's friction to people entering the subscription program. The way that you do this is by framing this offer correctly, which goes to this part over here, which is the free gifts. Free gifts is one of the best ways to add value into your offer. And if you do it the correct way with low cost of goods on the gifts, so this can be digital products, this can be products that just cost you not that much to add, this can be affiliate softwares potentially that go in, or your own softwares that you add into it. There's really an endless amount of ways you can do it, but thinking about products that can cost you little to no money to add, that directly add value to the product that they're purchasing. So when you're thinking about these free gifts, it's not just random stuff that you throw in there. It's, I have a pen in my hand right now, so not that you're going to be selling a pen, but if I were selling a pen and there was a way to add different ink cartridges in this pen, I would want to give the ink cartridges as a free gift, where you get backup ink cartridges with your pen. That's a really shitty example, but hopefully you guys get the point. I actually have a Ridge wallet over here. Shout out to Sean. With a product like this, maybe I add a Apple Tag type of tracker that comes with the wallet, like a card that you can put in there. Just thinking off the top of my head right now, but something that directly correlates with the product that you're selling so that it makes logical sense. It doesn't cost you that much money, but it adds a lot of perceived value. And the thing is, you want to frame it always as free. Don't bundle things together, because then you're making the consumer think about, okay, do I actually need this, this, and this? And then they're thinking about the price associated with the product that you're adding. The point is, it's supposed to just be a no-brainer because you're giving it to them for free. So even if they don't care that much about it, almost 100% of the time, they'd rather take something for free than not have it for free. I think that's why this works super well, when you just add the associated products that do really well with your core product into the offer and give it for free. I think the sweet spot here can be anywhere between 2 to even up to 5 different offers that you add in there. I think if you go overboard on it, then it might become a little overwhelming for the customer, where one, they might not be able to process all of the gifts that you're giving them and thus all of the value that you're giving them. And two, if it's really too much value, they might start to look at it as a scam. So you have to find the right balance in between there. Adding these free gifts around your product is one of the easiest ways to add value. Then doing, the discounting elements where on top of the main product that they're buying with those free gifts, they're also getting a discount around the product. They're also getting money off on the product, especially if they're opting into a subscription. The key takeaway here is that if they're going to get these free gifts and they're going to get, let's just say 30% off or 50% off the main product, whatever you frame that discount as, they're only getting this when they add into a subscription program. If not, then they don't get all that free value that you're adding. That's how these three things really tie together, which if you also frame this correctly, now a product that you might only have been able to sell for, let's just say $50, because of how well positioned it is, assuming you get your branding right and you get everything looking right, you might easily be able to justify selling that product for $60, $70. And even if people would think that outright the product might be a ripoff at that price point, because of all the value that they're getting, they're going to say, okay, this is still a really good deal. That's how all these components can come together to allow you to dictate how much you can sell and sell on the premium side of the market, because you're giving more value than everyone else while still being efficient in your business model because you're still considering the cost of goods. And then the last part of this is just bundles. So the other thing that you can do and that you should do is if your product is, again, a consumable product, which I'm assuming for a big part of this foundation it is, then giving people the option to buy in bundles, which I like to do in 6, 3, or 1. I like to do that rather than like 3, 2, or 1 of the same exact product. But with each additional product that they buy, they get an additional discount. So if they were to buy 6 for that $50 product, let's just say, they would get it each at $30 versus the $50. If they bought it at 3, they might get it at $40 versus the $50. And if they buy the 1, they get it at $50. So it's a simple pricing framework that also will raise your average order value because of this component. All in all, this comes together of how you position your product. So if I were selling, again, the Ridge wallet over here, but I'm now giving, I guess this is a bad example because of the subscription component of it. Okay, so now that you guys actually understand this model, let me show you a really good example of how this actually all comes together. So pretty much all of those components in which I just said. As you guys can see, there's free gifts, Javi Coffee over here, if you guys have seen them. Pretty much you get these different free gifts and they're tying it right back to the AOV component. So if I went for 3 bottles, then I would only get 3 gifts. If I went for 1 bottle, then it's only 1 gift. If I go for 2 bottles, still only 1 gift. So the 3 or 4 is how I unlock all of those different gift components within the offer. And as you can see over here, subscribe and save every 30 days to unlock all those gifts, versus if I wanted to buy 1 bottle, $21.95 each. But if I were to do it this way, I would have to pay $25 and do no auto ship over here. And then there's different bundles over here, which I guess they give you the gifts as well. You're going to have to buy much more bottles, I think, to unlock that. So you go at least 4 bottles to get those gifts, just like how it was before. So at least they're still getting the AOV components when they do it like that. So they're giving you the option to still buy it as a one-time purchase, but they're maximizing the value over here and they're not making it super prevalent. And you're going to have to buy it at a higher price point to be able to do it. This is offer positioning, where you're maximizing the AOV by having the different bundles, which there's good reason why you'd want to have multiple bundles. Because first off, if I went for 4 bottles, there's also all these different flavors, which I can choose for here. So it gives me good reason to buy those types of bundles. So the bundles really only works if it makes logical sense with the product that you're selling. But then the other component is all these free gifts. I'm getting this recipe booklet, again, free for them. They make it one time and it's free. A magic spoon, super low cogs on that. A mystery box, we don't know what it is, but I'm assuming it's also going to be low cogs. Free shipping, they're already probably baking that into their cost. So little to no cost for them extra in terms of what they're already giving you. This is positioned perfectly, allow them to maximize subscriptions and average order value and frame their product in a way where they can get away with selling $22 for a little bottle of coffee. It makes sense because of how much value that they're still giving you and framing everything here. So I went pretty deep into point number 1 over here, but I just want to emphasize how important this point is, because if you don't get this part right, then it's going to be much more difficult to get everything else. This is the foundation. Obviously, it's the offer foundation of your entire business model, right? And how you're going to scale, which I'll tie back into as we go into more points. Number 2 is having an Amazon listing, which is going to give you a halo effect from Amazon. So what that means is, depending on how good your listing is and how good your product is and the reviews that it gets and the reviews in terms of what you get on Amazon, that will directly correlate with what percentage of sales that you get from Amazon. So I've explained this in a lot of my videos, but pretty much the way to think about it is that there's a percentage of buyers, probably majority of buyers actually, that do pretty much 100% of their shopping on Amazon. So if they want to buy something, they might see an ad on Facebook. Okay, they like this product. First thing that they're going to do is go to Amazon and look at the product. If you don't have your product positioned in a prime way on Amazon where you have good reviews, a solid listing, people are talking well about the product, it's going to be very difficult to capture those sales first and foremost. And if you don't have a listing, then obviously you're not going to capture any of those sales, but those sales are going to happen on Amazon regardless. If you introduce them to the product category or spike their interest in the product, if they don't buy from you, those people are just going to buy from someone else on Amazon. And a lot of the times there'll be people that are bidding on your brand keywords that are on Amazon because your listing is not there. That is why this point is super important, because it's not like you're cannibalizing on the sales that you would be getting from Meta. It's just you're not getting those sales and leaving money on the table. This part is super crucial because if you do this right, it can do 20 all the way upwards of 40% of your overall sales. For us, as you saw in the beginning, as I mentioned, we're doing about 20% of our overall sales from Amazon. So whatever we do on the Shopify show, assume that whatever revenue we do there, we're going to do 20% on Amazon. This is super important because that revenue that you do will be at extremely high returns on ad spend. I'm talking all the way through 5 to 10 return on ad spend on every dollar you put on Amazon, because you barely have to spend money on ads because, again, those people are carrying over to Amazon regardless. The simplest way to look at this is having an Amazon listing side by side with your scale on your Shopify storefront is literally free money. It's the closest thing to free money that exists in this world. So you need to have a solid Amazon listing. Figure that out. It's a difficult process, especially if you've already started to scale, because you're going to have Chinese resellers that are going to have trademarks on your listing. A lot of things I can say on that, but the point is, whatever it takes, it's worth figuring out. That's point number 2. Point number 3, the obvious point, which you guys already all know, is creatives. But I want to talk about the dichotomy between quantity and quality of creatives, because each of these are equally as important. And I have a full video that goes in depth onto this, so I'll try to keep this super light. When I'm thinking about creatives, it's the combination of both of those 2 points, right? So the more that I scale, the more quantity that I need to make sure I can keep up with as my volume and as my spend increases, especially on Facebook. I need to make sure that I have a fixed ratio. If I'm spending $100,000 a month on Facebook ads, then I want to usually keep a 20% testing budget ratio. It could be between 10 to 20%, I would say, is a good ratio to go for. That would mean on $100,000 a month, I should be spending on a 20% ratio on that, $20,000 a month in testing budget. Now, the way that I actually go about testing that in Meta, I'll touch it in a second, but pretty much it's with an ABO campaign. What I need to understand is what is usually my cutoff point. Let's say that product I'm selling is $50, and let's say I'm okay with spending 2 times my AOV before cutting off a creative. So if it's $50, I can spend $100 on a creative. What that will mean for me is that I can test 200 creatives over the course of the month based on this ratio here. If I'm spending $100 per creative to get to that level of quantity that I need. Now, the thing is, if I wanted to scale this up $500,000 a month in spend, then all of these ratios would have to go based on that same testing ratio. 20% is the testing ratio that I have. Then at 500,000, add $100,000 in testing budget over here, same cutoff point, which would mean that I have to 5x this amount, and I would need to be testing 1,000 creatives over the course of the month. People think that scaling is just a matter of ramping up your budgets. Staying at those higher levels, you need to make sure that you have winning creatives to help fuel that amount of scale. So understanding the quantity portion as you scale is the first part that's super important. You need to actually have high hit rate on the creative. To extend out on that, what you need to start to understand is out of all of these creatives you test, let's say your hit rate is 5%, which would be a decent hit rate. But as you start to boost up the volume, let's say that goes down to 1%, right? Volume that you test. So with these numbers, these would both get you to only around 10 winning creatives a month, right? Because 5% of 200 would be 10. and 1,000, but out of 1% would be 10. This actually isn't doing any good for your business. What you need to make sure is that as you scale, you can either keep that hit rate the same or that it's not going down to a low winning creatives. And ideally you keep it the same and continuously try to improve that hit rate. If you can improve the hit rate, let's say you can get it to 10%, right? From 5% to 10%, then that can also determine how many creatives you actually need to test. Because if you're getting a 10% hit rate, then even though you're moving up your budgets, you might be okay with only testing 500 creatives instead. Because at a 10% hit rate, that means you're going to have 50 winning ads, which is going to be probably enough for you to be able to sustain at those levels. Finding the right intersection between the two of those to allow you to maintain scaling, that's really the most important components there. Now, based on all of this, you need to make sure that you're setting these projections ahead of time. So you need to be planning in advance with having the proper data and KPIs to know, especially if you're starting to get into a scaling mode, how much you intend to scale in the next month. Because if you just do it randomly, then there's no way you're going to be able to maintain the right ratio of quantity and quality of your creatives to help you sustain at those higher levels. So you have to take a more strategic approach to scaling that creative volume. So setting out the projections of how much you want to spend month over month on Meta, which will then determine how many creatives you actually need, and understanding your hit rate balance between those two will help you understand really just all of those different components that will come with scaling your volume and your quality. Key part of actually being able to do this is you need to understand your output from your team. So again, I have a whole video on this, so I don't want to go too in depth on it, but pretty much you need to understand how much each team member can handle between your video editors, your creative strategists, your copywriters, the content creators, understanding how many each person can do in terms of units of creatives, breaking that down between those different positions. And then based on all of that and based on those targets, now you can start to assemble the proper team to help you scale the creatives volume, especially as you're trying to scale your brand up. Point number 3 on creatives. Going into point number 4, it's your funnel, which there's 3 main components that are actually super important on the funnel. And I think that when people think about their funnel, they usually are just thinking about conversion rate, but your funnel affects way more than just conversion rate. It also affects your average order value. So how much each customer is spending with you when they land on your website, and also the lifetime value. So how much each customer is not only spending with you on that visit, but depending on the offer that you get them into, again, which goes into the subscription component. If you can get people into a subscription program, that's also going to determine how much people will spend with you potentially over the next 3 months to year to multiple years if you get them in a sticky offer that keeps them subscribed if it's the right type of offer. All of that can start to be optimized on your funnel. And again, I have a whole video that goes into all the components of the funnel. So I want to keep this pretty high level in terms of what I want you to think about for right now, where funnel is you need to find what your primary objectives are. So what I mean by that is you have to do this also in accordance to your data. So the first part that's super important is you need to have the right data infrastructure, meaning that you can understand that if you're using, let's just say, a pre-lander, you can understand what the pre-lander CTR, so the click-through rate from your pre-lander page to your Shopify sales page, what are the numbers on that? You need to understand, is that 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 30%? Because depending on where that number is and what your benchmarks are, then you can understand, is that what you need to optimize? If that's not what you need to optimize, then maybe it's your Shopify conversion rate overall on a specific landing page. And I think people look at these metrics too granular, where they'll go on the Shopify dashboard and look at their conversion rate and think that's what their conversion rate is. But there's a lot of different pages being mixed together. You need to understand the direct traffic URLs that you're sending, how are those converting, and how are those converting in full funnel sequence, so that you can find what are the biggest bottlenecks that you have and optimize in accordance to that. Now, that's more on the conversion rate side, but if it's an average order value problem, then there's a lot of things that you can optimize, starting with your offer and the pricing point that you have. Could be the additional cross sells and upsells that you add across your funnel. Really, just to go into all of these points, it would take me probably a full hour to touch on all of these things. So to really just touch on the emphasis that I want to get at here is that you need to have clear data across these different metrics of your conversion rate, your average order value, and your lifetime value. So lifetime value, the main thing that you need to think about from your funnel perspective is what is that opt-in rate to your subscription program? The Javi example, I would assume they're probably getting at least like a 70%, maybe 80% opt-in rate because of how they position their offer in how they're sending people to those subscription-based pages. Some people might be much lower. You might be at 20%. And that's something that if I were focusing on this type of model, that would be one of the main things and probably the first priorities I have to optimize. You need to have your data, which based on that data, you can then prioritize on what do you think is the biggest impact on your business model as a whole. Pretty much you need to understand all those so that you can make the right decisions in terms of what to optimize. Point number 5 is then Facebook and your multi-channel marketing approach. So the reason why I'm separating Facebook from all the other channels that you could be using, again, this is where I think most of the people in this industry and in this space that are giving advice to people that kind of only focus on the Facebook point, but the other channels is just as important, if not even more important, to being able to scale on Facebook than Facebook is itself. Facebook, you should look at as your core driver of awareness. Facebook is at the top level and it's going to get you the most reach and the most impressions, but it shouldn't be where you're trying to make your profit in your business. That should be the fuel and the driver, as I mentioned, but not where the profits come from. The profits should then be coming from, one, if you do this right and you have a subscription program, you should be making your profits from the subscription. You don't have to make your profits now on month 1. You might start to make your profits on month 2 or month 3. I wouldn't recommend going much further than month 3, but depending on how long you can extend those horizons of when you want to actually make your profits, which I'll touch into again on the last point I'll get into, the more that you can actually start to scale on Facebook. Talk about this example in a lot of my videos, but just to drive this point home, let's say your product is a $50 AOV. And if you were just trying to make sales directly on Facebook, you might have to maintain a $25 cost of acquisition to make that work. Let's say you have this subscription program, and let's say that within the first 90 days, this will be an extreme example, it goes up to $100, right? Because you have the recurring rebills. Obviously, there's going to be some churn in between. Let's just say that it gets up to $100 by month number 3. So even if I wanted to maintain at this same ratio, which this ratio over here would be a 2 return on ad spend. If I want to have that same type of ratio over here, then that means my CAC can now be $50 just to be at the same level. So I can 2x the amount that I'm willing to spend because I'm moving my horizon of how long I'm willing to wait to get paid back, still in a cash flow cycle that is reasonable, because 90 days is still reasonable to balance your cash flow around. But if I'm willing to even break even, and let's say that I know that over 12 months, I might make $400 over the course of the year. Now, again, this is still super extreme. I might be willing to spend $75 here on my CAC. So 3 times more than I was willing to pay in this original example, because I understand my model over here. I understand that I have this subscription take rate. I know that over the course of the year, I'm going to be making $400. So $400 divided by that 75 is still hard to do the mental math, but above a 5, right? Return on my ad spend, more or less. So based on those numbers, I have a lot more room to scale than what I actually understand. That's the first component from the subscription, but then the same thing starts to happen with Amazon as well, because on this ratio, on this first purchase, again, I said that you'll get 20% of your sales at least from Amazon. So 20% on this would be an additional $10 that you can expect to make on Amazon, which will be $60. And on that $10, because let's just say it's going to be at least, let's say it's an extreme example, 10 return on ad spend, you can expect that you're literally only spending $1 more. So your CAC in this example will go to $76. But you also know that you're making actually $60 on that first purchase. And you can add that all into this equation to help you scale further. That's with Amazon. Now, the same thing starts to happen when you add these other channels, because if you have Google, that can get you a better CAC that's also directly correlated with how much you spend on Facebook, because you'll have brand search there, you have other components there. This all allows you to start to drive up how much you can spend on customer acquisition on Facebook, which is what makes scaling on Facebook a whole different ball game than how it's presented by the gurus, right? Because the gurus are telling you that you need to make your money on Facebook, but you're going to get wrecked when you're competing against someone like me that's willing to spend in the same product category as you 3 times the amount, because I have my subscription program dialed in. I have Amazon to help support that additional scale. And I have all of these other channels around Facebook that allow me to not maintain my profits based on Facebook. And I'm still making
probably way more profit than you over the course of the year because of all the profits that I'm making on the back end side of that. Overall, your job with Facebook is to use it as your growth driver of your business and make your profits from those supporting channels, Amazon, and your subscription program. That's how we use it. And that's how I recommend you start to look at your business model if you want to take the approach that I'm mentioning over here, which leads me into point number 6, which is your retention program. So there's a few key things to consider here. The first point circles back to what I said over here, which is your subscription take rate. This is going to be how many people actually enter your program. So again, in theory, you want this to be as close to 100% as possible, but reality is it probably won't be. You might start by adding a subscription offer and maybe you can get it to 20%. So I would keep on optimizing that until you get it to at least above 50%. And it should be well above 50%. On our offers, we're seeing above 80% on a lot of them. You want to get it above that point, but this is really the first thing that you need to optimize because this is how many people will actually enter your subscription program. The second part of it, and this is really the crucial part, which is the first 3 months. And I'll show you why the first 3 months is super important over here. So to get to an example like what I just showed you over here, where $50 goes to 100, that's all going to be determined on what your churn rates are on the first 3 months. So I want to make this super simple over here, just so you guys can understand it. So we're going to draw this out month 1, month 2, and then month 3. So let's say when people enter your program, your churn rate is about 60%. Let's say that on month 2, this is how many people maintain in your program. Let's say that month 2, it's around 60%. And then let's say by month 3, it's at 20%. For this example, let's do the math live together. Let's say your subscription average order value, so the amount that you're rebilling, is that same $50 portion. At $50, if you maintain 60% for that month 1, that's going to be an average of $30. If you maintain 40% of your customers for month 2, so around that $50, we're going to talk about that 40%, that's going to be $20. And if you maintain 20% at that $50 for that month 3, then we're going to be at $10 additional. In this example, we're talking about over the course of this time frame, you're going to be adding an additional $60, which with your base AOV of $50, this will get you to that $110 example. So it's actually more than what I put of that $100 price point in this type of scenario. But I want to show you what happens if you make some simple tweaks here and what this can actually start to look like. Let's say you get that to 70%. Let's say you get that to 50%. And then let's say you get this to 30%, right? So not anything too drastic in terms of how much you improve each of those cohorts, but now the 70%, so let's do the same math. That would be $35 here. Then let's do the 50% over here. So that's going to be $25. And then let's do the 30% over here, which is going to be $15. And now we add all these together, 35, 25 plus 15. And now we get $75, which is what we add, plus the base $50, and now we're at $125. Now, this is going to go in direct correlation with how much you're willing to spend on acquiring a customer. And that's why the first 3 months are super crucial, because the more that you can optimize each of these cohorts, the more that this number actually gets up to, and the more that you're willing to, again, spend now on acquisition costs with all the supporting systems of Amazon and other channels, the more that you can now start to spend on Facebook, which is the main driver. So these are the most important months of the program, which to optimize it, there's a lot of different ways. But another way goes back to the first point, which I was talking about, which is free gifts. So incentivizing people along the way of what you can give them so that they know that if they stay till month 2, they're going to get this gift. And if they stay till month 3, they're going to get this gift, right? There's obviously endless amounts of things that you can do that I'm not going to go too deep on this video. But the point is, optimizing for those first 3 months is going to be the most important point because of this example over here. And then lastly, it's your 12-month LTV to CAC ratio. So really, it can also just be your general LTV to CAC ratio, but I think that's too broad. 12 months to rely on it for when you're going to get paid back is too risky of a business model to actually go after because it's still unpredictable. You need to have really good data, and that can obviously change in a lot of different directions. But that's why the 3-month time frame is the best to actually do your optimizations off of. But the 12-month time frame is where it gets super interesting to understand what your profits will be, which goes back to the example over here, which maybe in the 12-month time frame, depending on what these retention rates look like, it might be at that $400 price point, which means over the course of the year, I'm going to be making a ton of profit on each of those new customers that I actually bring in. All in all, just to tie all these points together and then go into the new business model over here. The difference here is that we're focusing on rebuilding our foundation first and foremost, and thinking about that foundation as the center point of the business model. So getting that offer right, where ideally we can position it in a way that we're more valuable than all of our competitors, so that we're competing on value and not price, and ideally use that to leverage us into a subscription program. That's going to be the core foundation and component of the business model, which then having Amazon to support that structure will help us tremendously when we're trying to scale on our paid acquisition channels. Now, the main driver of your paid acquisition channels is going to come from your creatives, which is a combination again of your quantity, how much you can produce, and keeping the quality constant, or ideally better, the more that you still produce. Really, the goal of all of that between quantity and quality is to produce more winners, which is going to be the core component of what actually allows you to push on Facebook, which is the core driver, and then have those supporting channels, like especially Google, to help you recoup and make more of those profits. And funnel is really just an extension of your creatives, but really where you're sending all that traffic to make sure that the traffic that you're getting and garnering interest from your creatives, you're making sure that you're maximizing how many of those people actually buy on your website, your conversion rate, how much they spend when they come on your website, the average order value, and how much they spend over the course of the next 3 months and year, the lifetime value, by getting them into that subscription program, so that you can get into point number 6, which is your retention program overall, and how much customers will actually spend by optimizing those different levers that you have, especially in the first 3 months, really trying to maximize those different cohorts so that you can maximize the amount that you make from all those different customers. And then over the course of the year, how can you just maximize the 12-month LTV and then also your general LTV as a whole? And when you look at your business model like this, now you're playing a different game. You're not competing for the rising cost of acquisition, because now you can start to sustain higher cost of acquisition, which is going to raise every year because there's also increased competition that is coming more and more into the market. This is what's going to allow you to defend yourself over the long run and over the future of Shopify and e-commerce, is by thinking about your business model like this. So now to tie this whole point home, I want to go back to what I said in the beginning, where to actually make FU money with Shopify and with your brand and with e-commerce in today's day and age, it's about thinking how you actually add enterprise value to your company. And there's nothing that can add more enterprise value than a sustainable and predictable stream of revenue, which comes in the form of subscriptions and monthly recurring revenue. So if you're a beginner thinking about how you can enter a business model similar to this, or if you're already scaling, figuring out how you can either transform your offer or add a secondary offer around components like this, is really the foundation to getting between a 4 to 8x multiple on your EBITDA, rather than a 2 to 4x on, and that's if you have a really solid brand that you've done really well over the course of multiple years, then maybe getting to that rate. Now, once you start to get to higher numbers, $50 million a year in sales, $100 million a year in sales, then scratch what I'm saying, because the numbers can go all over the place at that range. But still, I know a lot of people that even are doing $100 million a year that are having a tough time selling their business because they don't have these components in it. So these components, if you think about it from a buyer's perspective, of someone that actually wants to buy a business, this makes a lot more sense for them to buy, because they know they can see, okay, you're doing $500,000 a month in subscription revenue, $1 million a month in subscription revenue. Now that business is super attractive because I know that money's going to be coming in month over month. And although obviously there's going to be churn and different numbers, you have enough data and enough predictability to understand that there's a solid foundation there that you can then go out and do all these other components and other scaling pieces with. I'm also excited to announce that I put together my first ever offer for you guys. So after getting an overwhelming amount of you guys in my DMs asking for some form of a mentorship, some form of coaching, some form of consulting, I've decided that it's time to actually be able to offer something. Now, the caveat is that it's going to be very limited. I'm only going to be doing something for 10 different founders and brand owners. That's not like a scarcity tactic or anything like that. It's just because that's the capacity that I would personally have. This is going to be one-on-one coaching directly with me, where I'm going to be working hand in hand with you to pretty much implement everything that I just went over in this video and a lot more. And we're going to be open sourcing the different SOPs and structures that we're currently utilizing in our business to scale to $50 million over the course of this year. The only reason I'm even giving an opportunity like this right now is because over the next 6 to 12 months, I'm planning to start investing, partnering, or acquiring different businesses in the e-commerce space. So I'm kind of looking at this as a stepping stone to being able to do that. Now, the piece of that is that it's not going to be cheap, but what I can assure you is that you will make a return on whatever you pay me. That's the whole goal with this thing. If you guys are interested, you can apply down below. I put a Google form down below. You can just fill that in. It's about 20 questions or so, take you 5 to 10 minutes. And from there, if I do decide to work with you, I'll reach out to you directly. Last point here is that everything that I'm talking about on my YouTube channel is the same exact strategies that we would be utilizing. The difference here is that you're obviously just going to be having access to me directly to implement all those pieces one-on-one. So if you can't afford it, or if you're not at $100,000 a month yet, don't worry, just keep on watching my free content and hopefully we'll talk soon.